Welcome to today's explainer. Look, if you've ever felt your blood pressure absolutely skyrocket during homework time, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're unpacking a really practical strategy based on some fascinating research by Dr. Omer Çelikkol. He's an associate professor of education. We're talking about how to interrupt those infuriating repeated mistakes and how to transform that daily homework struggle from, a total emotional battlefield into a calm, strategic problem-solving session.
Because honestly, we've all been there, right? Picture this. It's like a scene from a movie we've all lived through. Your kid just finished 10 math problems. You look at the page and realize, oh no, they've made the exact same error on 6 of them. In a moment of just pure frustration, you point to the paper and ask the dreaded question. We already talked about this. Why do you keep making the same mistake? And right on cue, your child just shrinks down into their chair looking completely embarrassed and mumbles, I don't know. So you explain the rule again, they nod, and then, yep, they make the exact same mistake on the very next problem.
It's incredibly overwhelming. But hey, take a deep breath. Today, we've got a structured roadmap to completely shift this dynamic. We're going to cover 1. The frustration trap, 2. 5 sources of errors, 3. Finding the decision point, 4. The 5-part action plan, and finally 5. The 7-day experiment.
Okay, let's dive right into this, starting with our first step, number 1, the frustration trap.
Now, what's really interesting here is the core paradigm shift it demands from us adults. When a mistake happens for the 5th time, our default, and it's so natural, is to assume the child is just being careless or lazy, or maybe they're just not listening. We kind of treat the mistake as a character flaw, but the research tells us we have to stop doing this. We need to shift gears. We've got to stop judging character traits and start objectively analyzing error patterns. Think of the mistake as evidence, like a clue at a crime scene. Ask yourself, when exactly does it occur? What specifically is being repeated? Does the child actually even know the correct rule? This one simple shift from emotion to observation, it literally changes everything. Which brings us to part 2, 5 sources of errors. Because let's face it, just repeating our corrections louder and slower, that simply doesn't work. We need to know exactly why the mistakes repeat. It turns out there are 5 specific reasons a mistake keeps popping up. First, incomplete understanding, meaning they memorized a rule but don't actually know why it works. Second, a weak prerequisite skill. Think about a kid struggling with long division just because their basic multiplication facts aren't mastered yet. The foundation just isn't there. Third, an automated wrong habit. This is when they've practiced it the wrong way so many times it's just become a reflex. Fourth, a failure to recognize the situation. They know the rules, sure, but they don't notice when to actually apply it in a new context. And fifth, missing self-monitoring. This basically just means they lack a routine to check their own work. So the crucial point here is this. Blindly forcing your child to sit there and bang out 20 more problems of the same type, that might actually be the absolute worst thing you can do. If they're operating with an automated wrong habit, more practice doesn't make perfect. It actually makes the error permanent. It literally just makes that wrong pattern faster and more deeply ingrained.
Let's move on to our next section and see how this builds into an actionable strategy. Here's part 3, finding the decision point. We need to stop just looking at that final wrong answer sitting at the bottom of the page. Instead, I want you to mentally zoom in on the exact moment your child's reasoning split between the wrong path and the correct path. To find this decision point, ask your child to think out loud. Try asking, hey, what did you do first? Or what were you trying to find here? You're essentially acting like a detective, trying to locate the absolute earliest incorrect decision, rather than just pulling out the red pen on the final result. All right, now that we know what we're looking for, let's get into the practical toolkit. Moving to part 4, the 5-part action plan. Let's walk through this seriously empowering sequence step by step. Step 1, name the pattern neutrally. Step 2, find that decision point we just talked about. Step 3, contrast the wrong and correct paths. Step 4, create an interruption cue. And step 5, practice a small mixed set. Remember, the ultimate goal here isn't some flawless worksheet produced just because you are hovering over their shoulder, right? The real goal is accurate recognition and helping them become independent. So let's look at step 1 in action. Instead of that incredibly unhelpful, you always do this, try saying something like, this same error appeared in several questions. Do you see the difference there? The first one kind of attacks the child, but the second one, it neutrally and objectively names the pattern. It immediately de-escalates the tension in the room and actually invites your child to collaborate with you to solve a puzzle. Now jumping to step 3, contrasting paths. When you place a correct example right next to an incorrect one, don't just hand them the answer. Ask them what clue tells you which method to use here. Your child doesn't just need another correction, they need a discrimination rule. They need to genuinely understand the structural difference between when to use strategy A versus strategy B. Which leads us perfectly into step 4, creating an interruption cue. The absolute secret sauce here is that the cue must appear before the usual mistake even happens. You can use short little questions written right at the top of the page like, "Did I copy the sign correctly?" or "Check the operation before calculating." Actually, it could even be just a physical symbol or a brightly colored mark right next to the specific type of problem that usually trips them up. And this brilliantly illustrates how we can correct our kids without totally taking over the wheel. When you say, "Hey, 3 answers on this page contain the same kind of mistake. See if you can find one," you are totally empowering them. Look, if we as adults just sit there and erase and rewrite and repair every single little error, well, sure, the paper looks great, but the child hasn't learned a thing about detecting their own patterns. We want to support their detection, not perform the correction for them. Throughout this entire process, your language matters so much. Letting a child know, "Hey, you are not the mistake. We're just analyzing a strategy," is deeply protective. Repeated academic failures, they're emotionally painful. Humiliation naturally narrows a child's attention and basically just makes them want to go hide. But calm, objective analysis, that makes it safe for them to admit they're confused and to actually feel okay asking for your help. All right, now it's time to put all of this incredible theory into real-world practice. Welcome to part 5, the 7-day experiment. Here is your assignment for the next 7 days. I want you to pick just one repeated academic error. Just one. Don't try to fix everything at once. Use our 5-part sequence and track these specific metrics: the exact form of the error, the task types it shows up in, whether the child can detect it independently, how effective your interruption cue is, and if they can actually explain the rule back to you. What you're looking for by the end of the week is whether their accuracy is improving, way before you ever even worry about their speed. Now, an important caveat here. If you run this experiment and these persistent errors continue across different settings, despite your clear instruction and targeted practice, well, it may require professional educational or healthcare support. A home strategy is amazing for identifying patterns, for sure. But if there's an underlying learning disorder or an attention regulation difficulty or maybe a working memory weakness, you might need a qualified assessment to really get to the root cause. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one really powerful, provocative question to ask yourself the very next time you sit down for homework time. Are you judging the child, or are you analyzing the strategy? Because the exact moment you stop judging the child and start analyzing the strategy, you empower them. You empower them to recognize their own patterns, interrupt their old habits, and check their results totally independently. You literally have the tools to completely change your homework dynamic tonight. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and happy learning.